got to teach the world to sing. Sing with me. Perfect harmony. Perfect harmony. I like to ride the world.
Gun.
And keep it company.
Welcome, everyone, to I'd Like to Buy the World a Gun. I'm your host, Kelton, and I'm joined by fantasy expert, Dredd. How's it going, sir?
Please don't say that. I would like to continue
knows
being late.
everything, undisputedly correct about any and all aspects. And, I mean, not only are the people who disagree with you wrong, they might also be illiterate and inbred. I'm just reading your bio at this point. It's a very aggressive Twitter bio, but...
Right, exactly. You got to keep it 100 with these Twitter bios.
Yeah, it's all written in Elvish too, so there's a lot of like Middle English AEs thrown in randomly. We are talking, of course, about season 1 of The Lord of the Rings: Rings of Power, available on Amazon Prime. You know, that amazing streaming service that gives you other titans like Reacher and Thursday Night Football. So, huzzah!
I think that Rings of Power, no matter how terrible the rest of the seasons go, will have been a better expenditure than Thursday Night Football.
Agreed. The costuming department, I think, also would agree. Those fucking color rush uniforms.
Again, even with the CGI, Rings of Power has better costumes than the Thursday Night Football.
You know what? We could do like a fantasy and football episode next year that I think would be fun. Talk about like what archetypes exist, comparing various shows. That seems like a fun off-season thing to do.
Oh yeah, I'm into that.
What we have going on with this episode, since this is kind of a part 2, we are going to look back on the season that was with the Rings of Power, and then also try and figure out maybe what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and then wrap things up with what we think may happen in the next season. So with things kind of being in the inverse, I'm going to kick things off, Dredd. What weaponry would be required to take over this world, now knowing what we know?
I think I had told you before that if you had like some 6 shooters, you'd be good.
Mm-hmm,
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that you'd probably need 12 plague blankets and a long-range rifle.
Okay, no, I see that. That's a very interesting tactic. It's much different than my answer, which was I would just be nice, because apparently that's how I can get an entire orc army by, you know, not threatening genocide. Oh, and then also like the guy who seems kind of evil and shady. Yeah, maybe just like expect him to be the big bad guy and not, I'm just going to throw an idea out there, have him ride 6 days straight while having a quote-unquote mortal wound, but being fine and making an immediate recovery once inside your halls. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't trust that guy.
You know, that is a fair critique. I don't really have any notes.
I guess I would also have a map so that I could convince a wizard to decide that he's on my side instead, like a star chart map.
Yeah, I honestly think just having access to MapQuest would literally let you be the ruler of this place.
The gun is strictly just, you know, for having an aesthetic purpose to seem tough. But
exactly, it's more of an aesthetic thing. It's a what's it called? How do you say? It's like a red herring. You know, you flash the gun at first, but then it's all about the friends you made along the real gun is the friends we made along the way.
That's the tagline for this episode. Perfect. Let's talk about the way that this series kind of developed through season 1, which was in true fantasy fashion, splitting up all of our main characters into various little micro parties and then following subplots that ultimately weren't all resolved, of course, because it's season 1, but they didn't really interact with each other much either, which I thought was certainly a choice.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about like the actual structure of the show a little bit later. But actually, one of my major complaints about the show in general is that it's taken to what I actually think is like a really like sort of like modern fantasy take on how these shows are organized, which is that we know eventually that these things will cross, but we're basically forced to see them separated and like seemingly completely disjointed, with only the future sight as our guiding connection between these storylines.
Like, oh, just wait in season 3 when it all comes together. Oh boy.
Right. And like, I don't mean to be like too much of a downer on this, but like one of my biggest complaints in general for these kind of shows is around the what does the audience get to know, where does the distribution of what knowledge there is actually come in? Like, what does the audience get to know versus what is withheld from them solely because the characters don't know?
The answer is the audience doesn't know whatever the showrunners need the audience to not know. And then they say it's all actually super clever in the big master plan. When you think about it for half of a second, you're like, but why would that character act that way with that person apropos of nothing else being around? It all falls apart like a house of cards, much like the series House of Cards. But more accurately, I'm going to call this Westworld Season 2, which is, oh shit, oh fuck, I have to have an idea for something. The mystery box is falling apart. Something. Just wait till Season 3, huh? It's going to be really cool. And then, I don't know, I didn't watch Season 3 of Westworld. I hate any show that is trying to just hide information and try to seem clever, and that's exactly what the show did. So let's talk about the way the characters got split up, if that's all right.
Briefly, if we have time.
Oh, we always have time. Come on now.
To the point you just made, I think that's like, I sent a tweet that I wrote to you before this, but like, I think designating, withholding information from the audience just because the characters don't know it in order to create this sort of speculation machine is one of the laziest forms of storytelling there is. Almost like, and
correct me if I'm wrong, probably like the go-to move for a first-time showrunner and writing team. And so actually, you know what? Let me, I'm going to pump the brakes for just a second before I start like ripping this whole thing apart. This was actually better than I thought it was going to be.
I will also say that. Yeah, so part of why I get so frustrated is because I actually really like some of what they did.
Does this mean that Bayona as a director is good? Because for the first 2 episodes, I was like, there's some cool stuff that they're working with here.
Ultimately, I actually think the answer is probably yes. Because the actual directorial aspect of this show is very solid.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have a lot of complaints about the construction of the writing and basically the centralized conceit of some of how knowledge is allowed to be distributed.
Yes.
But I actually have very little complaints about the actual writing component or the actual directorial component of the show.
Yeah, the directing is fine. The CW levels of dialogue I take some issues with. But again, that's neither here nor there. So our parties, as we get to know them, we have Galadriel, who is just dealing with the PTSD of her brother being killed. Her brother giving such sage wisdom as like, why does a stone not float? And it's because it wants to know the darkness. Like, okay, all right. that was a spoonful of medicine that we all had to get used to for how this show was going to progress. Because then we jump forward 1,000 years and Morgoth, the big bad, has fallen. And now the version 2.0 of Sauron is on the run. And she's like this close to finding him, you guys. She's so close to finding him. And then she gets sent back to the land of the elves where she meets Elrond and Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter himself, which I like. Anytime Benjamin Walker is on the screen, I was like, ha, hey, you.
Now you look like you should be wielding an axe.
Do you want to do an action scene? No, you're going to stand there with like negative sideburns on your face. Cool.
You're just going to kind of do a little bit of pithy dialogue. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The rejected lines from the Game of Thrones season 9 writers' room is what happened there. So she gets told basically like, you broke the rules. You're a cop and you went too far this time. So we're gonna send you back to the home office. And they put her on a boat and she bails. And she then gets stuck out there on the ocean, and she is she lands like on a raft where there's a crew of survivors, one of whom is like ruggedly handsome but also kind of shady looking white guy. Like the not Aragorn is basically the
I was gonna
vibe.
say, clearly not being set up to make everyone think of, oh yeah, this is the Aragorn guy.
Yeah, and then he's like, oh no, I don't want the kingdom, blah blah blah. But that's later. So they survived like a big attack from a sea monster, and then they're able to raft together until they get picked up by a ship from Numenor, where that's where we're introduced to Numenor, which is kind of like, I don't know, humanity at its peak for fantasy Middle Ages time.
Yeah, they're the equivalent, and so like for later fantasy that comes along, this idea of like quote unquote high humans or humans that are like closer to elves or like that all comes from the Numenor in Tolkien. Aragorn is the last descendant of the Numenor kings. He lives to be like 500 something. Like these Numenors could live to be close to 1,000 sometimes.
And for anyone wondering, I am showing absolute restraint, not having added a Numa Numa song sound drop right now to while we're talking about this, playing in the background. Me not doing it, that is a sign of maturity and growth that I'm trying to put forward here.
I'm proud of you, Carlton. It's a big step.
The finger is hovering over the button, though, so let's see what happens later. Now, in Numenor, there is a old king that's on the verge of dying, and his daughter is like the queen regent, and then they have like their own like little like mini Game of Thrones happening that's taking place with their like warring guilds and different factions that are happening. We're introduced to Isildur, who is going to be the future king that decides to bitch out and not throw away the ring. But as of right now, he's just kind of a fail son who wants to go spend a semester in Europe.
He basically, his entire life is just fail son life. Like,
yeah,
he gets about 8 minutes of glory right after his dad dies, and then it's back to being a fail son again. He somehow manages to be the patriarch of his family and still a fail son.
That's what happens when you have that great a dad.
Right. He manages to win the war for humanity and still be a fail son.
I can't
Honestly,
wait.
This is something that I thought about a lot recently, or when we were going through this, but like, do you think the show would have just been better if they had just decided to do Game of Thrones Numenor edition?
Yes, 1,000%. And hear me out here. I mean, we're jumping a little bit. I think that's like what they're going to try and shift into. Because like the first season is mostly all about the elves. The next season's going to be mostly all about the dwarves. Then it's going to be mostly about the men. Then the fourth season is going to be like where all the storylines really converge together. The writing is on the wall with the show, but it also feels like they're like, well, you spent $1 billion just on getting the rights for this, so you're not going to say no to a second or third season. So the real issue becomes, are we getting a season 4? But regardless, Numenor Game of Thrones absolutely would have been the go-to move. And then you could have like the journey to the Elven lands, etc. But that being the nexus point would have been much, much better than what is essentially the B plot of this story, which is following the nomadic hobbits, proto-hobbits around when they're just kind of living their lives, and a giant wizard crashes in, and we're like, oh no, is this Sauron or is this Gandalf? And the answer is probably neither, but definitely a wizard, so it doesn't really matter. Also, I'm not sure if it is ultimately Gandalf, but like, even if he's not named Gandalf, it's Gandalf in everything but the name.
This goes back to actually one of my biggest critiques of writing a show for fandom. So not just for fans, but for fandom, is the, like, we don't get to enjoy any of these characters on their own merits because we are stuck considering them as potential other characters, like known lore characters. So rather than this character being introduced and us being interested about this character, we are instead forced to, like, solely enjoy him or speculate on him because he might be an actually relevant character to something we already care about.
And this is a fantasy show set 1,000 years before the main fantasy world that we're all familiar with. So they had the flexibility if they wanted to.
The only thing I hate more than the, oh, look, it's that guy, the, oh, I'm doing the face of the guy, like the soy face, and he's turning around and he's pointing. The only thing I hate more than that is But which guy could he be?
Mm-hmm.
Which of these super cool characters is he actually?
I don't know, maybe like if you were to do like a proto sci-fi western and you spent your entire second season wondering like who the man in black is going to be, huh? Maybe like that would be an apt comparison point for a bullshit reveal that doesn't ultimately matter, but it feels like a payoff of some kind.
Yeah, I think that one could make that comparison, and one would be completely fair in doing so.
It'd be like, can you believe it? Is this guy? So what? What does that change? Well, nothing actually, but like it's cool to think about. Is it really? Like, because let me blow through the B plot. Misadventures occur. Little hobbit girl is hiding the fact that she has a big wizard friend. Big wizard friend is revealed because he's like 9 feet tall compared to them. Then it's like, oh no, we have to run away. Wizard friend then protects the hobbit from like the lesbian trio that is chasing after him, and then like all of the cosplay level outfits that occur because they're like, you clearly are Sauron, and then he's like, no, I'm good, which feels like, you know, fans defending this show just clip that image being like, no, it's good, over and over again. And it turns out no, he's actually just like a regular wizard, maybe a good wizard, and he has to go off on an adventure. Like, it's completely other than the show. Like it doesn't affect the show in any way, shape, or form, and it's probably a third to a half of the actual show, which is only 8 episodes. So 3 or 4 episodes worth of time is spent on something that doesn't even relate to the Rings of Power right now.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
You know why this happened, though, Dredd? You want to know why this makes me giggle so much? Apparently Amazon, in its $1 billion acquisition of Lord of the Rings world, did not get the rights for the Silmarillion. And so they are trying to hint at certain aspects, but they don't have the rights to that. So that's part of why they're not doing the Morgoth storyline or anything else. Imagine spending $1 billion on just getting the rights to something and then not doing the thing that everyone's talking about. Like, they are trying to fill in the gaps, but they didn't need to. Like, just spend more money, get the Silmarillion rights, and then tell the story of Morgoth. Like, that seems like the clear and obvious answer from the jump.
I think even within this framework, even if you just like only accept what they have. So this is the part, and I alluded to this earlier, I actually really like aspects of what they did. I think that there are some really good choices when it comes to translating the sort of like lore stories of Middle Earth into this medium.
Sure. I'm happy for you.
Well, thanks. I just
fucking nerd, and it's bullshit storylines. Okay, sorry.
And I also think that, like, from like an actual show perspective, there's like definitely things to like about this show. It leaves so much meat on the table pointlessly, in my opinion.
Because it's a PG-13 rating, my friend.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that. It's also because maybe show security for 5 years. I'm really happy for the actors, set designers, and everything else, and for all these people that have jobs for 5 seasons, and I guess 10 years, because each season's going to take 2 years to make.
Season 2 coming out in 2024. Get fucked.
Like, we're going to have TV then?
Like, I'm supposed to care? I'm going to have completely forgotten about this show. Wheel of Time Season 2 trailer apparently came out. I haven't watched it. I'm not going to watch it until we have to cover the goddamn thing.
Right. And that's the thing, is that, like, I think that they have too much security. They are writing with too much knowledge that they don't have to make a single coherent story in one season.
I think the comparison to Thursday Night Football is very apt, because you spend all of this money and you're trusting other people to give you a good product. And if they're not giving you a good product, what are you going to do? Because you can't pull the plug. So you're stuck, basically. And this is almost the worst possible result for Amazon, because the show had some good elements in it, but it had a lot of bad elements in it. And the bad elements are not going to teach any of the people any lessons moving forward into season 2. So let me wrap up the other storylines that are occurring in the show, just the touch points of it, because Galadriel and the people of Numenor, they decide that they're going to go fight Sauron in the Southlands. So it's Galadriel, her Aragorn, definitely not anyone else, shady guy named Halbrand, and the fleet of seafaring people going into the Southlands, which are this kind of like backwater murky area where a sea plot has been occurring between I forget his name, but let's just call him Black Legolas, and a village woman, where, at least to my understanding, the elves have been posted in the Southlands for a while, for the past 100 years or so, since the fall of Morgoth, and all of those elves have been living at this garrison that's right by a human village. And wouldn't you know it, one of the elves and one of the women, they develop a relationship, and they maybe but definitely have a kid together, because the kid is like a perfect blend of the two of them, but the kid hates elves, so it kind of feels like there's a lot to unpack there of what's happening. It's very much like a Christian Walker kind of attitude about, like, there's a lot of like hatred towards this other that feels like it's because of a lack of self-examination about what's occurring. What I'm saying is maybe the dark arts are coming from the inside of the house.
I was going to say, do you think that his dad has CTE as well?
Oh, yeah. It'd be like, oh, what were you before a soldier? I was a gardener. Sure you were, buddy. Fucking stoner hanging out on the couch. Yeah, and so the elves retreat from the garrison, and then the people of the Southlands end up getting, well, I mean, they're not fully attacked yet, but these orcs start rising up, and their leader, Uruk, Adar, leader of the Uruk, I'm sorry.
How much do you want me to just give dorky history for anyone who might have missed it?
Just give me 1 second, because I want that dorky history. The guy playing Adar is Benjen Stark. And so like they're being very obvious with poaching some Game of Thrones talent and aesthetics and things like that. But this guy, Adar, you're thinking maybe he's going to be Sauron, but it's revealed that he's not Sauron, but he's one of the fallen elves, and he just kind of wants like a world for the orcs. Now give me who he actually is, historically.
So Adar is not, at least not to my knowledge, directly a character out of the Tolkien, but there is, so the original orcs, or Uruks, which is the term, are warped elves. It's a kind of a fucked up thing that Tolkien creates an entire species that's just another species that has been corrupted by the darkness.
Yeah, I mean, like, it'd be a fucked up thing to exist in mythology, like, right. I'm glad it exists in fantasy and fantasy only.
Right. The long and short of it is that because the original Uruks or orcs are still elves, they are tortured elves, magically twisted elves, but they are still elves. They are effectively immortal. So Adar is over 1,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, in the Silmarillion, there is a dark elf that dies in the War of Power that fills kind of a similar position, not the exact same character, but a similar position. Yeah. And I think that that's what they based the character on.
I think it was very interesting to give the orcs a sense of autonomy and culture, because like they might be a quote unquote violent, quote unquote brutish people, but they are industrialists in their own ways. They are trying to forge a homeland for themselves, very much in the same vein as they are a people without a home, but they did not ask to become this people necessarily. The idea of I'm just going to say a white savior leading a group of orcs that are treated like a brutish otherkin does feel a little weird, but again, I guess that's better than what the original source material is or was, because they're like, oh yeah, thank God we have Adar, or thank the one we have Adar, because without him, he's the one that brought us civilization and helped make us into what we were. And it's like, I don't think that's necessarily true.
It's supposed to make you semi-sympathetic for the orcs in general, but it does come across as like a little bit like paternalizing and like overly simplistic about how, like, for example, the concepts of a homeland are, or indigeneity, or like other aspects, or like people who was never asked even to exist or be a people, like where the responsibilities to that group come from.
Yeah, and the answer is they're going to take over all of the lava and magma.
Right. And to those that like don't have a full background, like orcs basically cannot stand the sight of the sun. They are incredibly sensitive to the sun to the point where like sunlight blinds them, burns their skin over time. And so if they're going to have a homeland, they need it to be effectively night all the time.
Crazy then how a volcano explosion happens a little later. But we get these characters kind of in play. And wouldn't you know it, when Galadriel and the people, the soldiers from Numenor arrive in the Southlands, the orcs and have all been attacking the people already in the Southlands. So there's the Legolas knockoff and then his maiden, who have I don't remember these characters' names because we only got the equivalent of maybe half of a movie with these people. Like, because we're too busy focused on fucking hobbits that don't end up going anywhere. Like, all of that could have been in season 2, and we could have gotten more time with these people. Where the storylines converge. Wouldn't that be crazy and wild to do? But regardless, a big event, big battle takes place. It's episode 6, and it feels like a giant finale because I guess like the scope of the show is highlighted here, because it was cool to see like a full-blown battle taking place. Like, this, I guess, is the equivalent of like a Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones, kind of an episode.
And it like completely, like, honestly, it's visually impressive.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of practical work is being done. Like, I love seeing stunt guys getting hurled like 15 feet up in the air on fire, because like they're having a blast on set that day. Like, they're doing what they love to do. Of course, then like the big reveal that like actually all of the people that were attacking them were like the traitorous Southlanders. So watching the elf kill like 8 people all at once, you're like, oh, he's just like killing humans. Okay, cool. No one thought twice about this. But then the orc army finally arrives, and then the Numenorian army arrives. They all are fighting. Numenor kind of wins, and then one of the Southlanders has a magic sword that gets turned like a key. Volcano explodes, and then you see what I'm sure is going to be parodied 1,000 times. The text that says Southlands gets turned into saying Mordor instead, and you're like, oh wow, I wonder who could have possibly missed this at all. The big volcano over here. Okay, cool.
It's a real, oh yeah, wow, what a surprise moment.
We're everyone in the audience is 2 steps ahead of the show, and so then after the big volcano explosion happens, people are treating their wounds. Galadriel and Halbrand go back not to Numenor, but back to the Elven city. I forget what that's called. But while there, the D plot that has been happening, which is Elrond and Doran, who probably, in my opinion, the best parts of this show.
By far, the best parts of this show are Elrond in like borderline situational comedy moments with Durin and his wife.
Yes, and I wonder where they got the idea of an elf and a dwarf doing buddy comedy together. It's new and it's groundbreaking, and it hasn't happened before. I'm going to take a big drink of water and rewatch these Peter Jackson films real quick, and I'll get back to you. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Well, there it is. They're just doing the exact same thing that they did there, where one is big and gruff and kind of mean, but actually he's a big softy on the inside. And the elf that seems pretty rigid and uptight, but when you know, he likes to cut loose too sometimes. Like, wow, cool. Like, I mean, we talk about a show that would be like Numenor Game of Thrones. If we did Numenor Game of Thrones and then the B plot was just like a Neil Simon-esque odd coupling of these two, perfect. Flawless, no notes.
Yeah, do Numenor Game of Thrones and do like Laverne and Shirley with Durin and Elrond.
I'm just picturing like the bottom third CBS promo with Durin and Elrond standing back to back making faces.
Durin and Elrond coming on Thursdays on CBS.
Because it's great. Because I mean, I also think that doing like a Game of Thrones, but of all of the dwarven lords, would also be cool.
For
and
sure.
You know, I don't know if maybe it's the practical outfits. Maybe people are worried about like the Hobbit movies having kind of killed the idea of focusing so much on dwarven characters. But regardless, I think that that would be something fun to explore that I think they are going to do next season. But it's, again, we'll get into what season 2 is going to have in store in a little bit here. The thing to focus on with them is that there's a new medal that has taken place. Yeah, crazy. And that there is maybe like one pen sized amount of mithril that's going to just be the big thing that's used later on. But the dwarves have a mountain of this stuff. And so my question to you, Dredd, is if one pen is apparently enough to become like some all-powerful level rings, what's the deal here? Because it seems like then dwarves control everything, right?
So this is a little spoilery if you want me to tell you what happens.
Yeah, sure, please.
An allegory for greed, and they dug too greedy and too deep. They basically, when we kind of see this in this season, but like they find shit that's underground that they probably weren't accounting for, and that ends up making the mithril mines like untenable. So like Moria in the original movies is this mine that contains a Balrog, known as Durin's Bane, which is eventually, maybe unsurprisingly, what kills Durin.
Shock with a name like Durin's Bane.
Shocking. But it's these like large like pit demon Balor creatures that effectively exist solely as the remaining lieutenants of Morgoth's army. So the strongest of the Balrogs was as strong as Sauron was.
Okay, cool.
And so they're like these demon creatures that are like
look metal as hell. Right. Yeah.
Comparably powerful to Maiar, which is what like Sauron is. It's just what Gandalf is, which is what Saruman is. Except they're like 40-foot tall demon things.
Again, like if you're that powerful, you might as well look that powerful.
So the check and balance to dwarves just controlling the world is that deep down there in those mines where they would be harvesting all these, tons and tons of mithril are.
I'm just saying,
deep.
If you get 5 pens worth, then you control the world. It's like the power levels don't make sense in this whole thing. But regardless, Elrond and Durin's buddy comedy unfortunately comes to a close where Durin is deposed and he's no longer the prince and heir apparent. And Elrond's like, man, that shit sucks. Anyways, gotta go. Be back in another 20 years or whatever. Don't have more kids without me. Haha.
Don't wait up.
Yeah. And he gets back and he talks to his engineering friend, who's the grandson of the guy who made the original Silmarils, right?
Yep.
And he's like, man, my grandpa, he did such cool shit, and I just want to do some cool shit of my own. And they're like, well, have I got the greatest idea for you? We're going to make a crown out of this mithril thing. They're like, oh, it's not going to work. A crown among one person, that'd be too powerful. And among 2 people would divide. So wristbands are out. Also, like people would think that we run a club with a cover charge of some kind. We're going to have to get elves that are under 2,100 years old to put X's on their hands. And no one wants that. That's a logistical nightmare. So what about the 3 promise rings that we're each going to wear? But we need magical gold and silver that's of the purest quality. If only one of us had like a dead item from a relative from the elven lands.
Right.
That has no impurities in it. And then when they melt it down, you can see like the impurity film on top. And I was like, come on, come on. It should have just glowed pure, but whatever. Dead Brothers dagger is what ends up making the rings. And yay, congratulations. The first step of the Rings of Power.
It's great. It's very normal. It's a completely reasonable plot point. It doesn't have any issues or holes or any...
You don't feel like you're speed running through it, because the character who I feel like I also forgot, Halbrand, went from being like, oh, I'm dying, oh, please help me, to being like, actually, we could do a couple of things here. We could do a couple of things here. We could pull that lever, maybe work with that level of gold. Just spitballing, me. King of the Southlands, a king that apparently hasn't had a true-born heir for 1,000 years, which makes all of the people of the Southlands' hopes of the true king will return. Man, again, talking about what type of weapon you would need to take it over, just saying that you're the true-born king.
Yeah, an Ancestry.com result.
Yeah, being like, what happened? Well, I have this coin purse. Oh, well, he's clearly the king. Just no notes. People being like, perfect. Yes, I will die for this man. Let's all unite under one banner.
and again, like, I can't even fully complain, because I actually think that the character of Halbrand is pretty well written as far as characters in the show go. Is it?
He is hinting at being Sauron from like episode 2.
Right. Okay. So I wasn't sure we were going to say that out loud, but yeah. So it becomes very clear, at least to me, that oh yeah, this is Sauron. Like Sauron, the most powerful aspect of Sauron is not just that he's like incredibly physically powerful; it's that he is a shapeshifter. He controls the hearts and minds of many people by being able to take on beautiful forms. He is Anadar. He is like all these other things. He is
also he's a cool hang. That's like underrated principle. Maybe it might be fun to bro down with Sauron. Like, sure, we might disagree about his politics, but we don't have to dive into that kind of stuff.
He's somehow pro climate change, but like not just like doesn't believe in climate change. He's actively rooting it up.
He treats it like a sports team. Like he's wearing, climate on the back of his jersey.
Let's go. Yeah, so like the end all be all is like it's pretty clear from pretty early on that he's hinting that he is some sort of evil character. And like I think that there's like a pretty good case to make that early on in the show, like it could have been that he was like, it turns out that he becomes the Witch King of Angbar, who's like one of the main like sort of like lieutenants for Sauron in the later on. And like I wouldn't have hated that either, to be honest.
I have another pitch for you, Tread.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Well, you know how there was like a big evil that one might say broke the world 1,000 years ago, and that then there are various people maybe making claims to be that thing reborn, giant thing that control fire. I don't know. Let's just call it the Dragon Reborn, right? Let's just say that. And that then maybe by claiming to be that, you then are able to get the attention of certain people who want to have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, again, a magical trio of some kind that then imbue you with certain elements of powers that possess your mind in some way and give you unique abilities that make you pass off as being this Dragon Reborn kind of character that needs to be then hunted down. That's just a pitch. That's an idea.
Let's not insult Lord of the Rings by comparing it to the Wheel of Time.
I'm not insulting Lord of the Rings. I'm insulting Rings of Power for lacking the basic idea of a reveal of some kind.
Yeah. I think again, like, so this was the issue I was talking about before, is that we we are left as an audience on purpose to busy ourselves with the job of speculation of who this character is instead of actually watching for the character. So by the time we get to, a certain point in the season where we should be like considering what the point and premise of this character is, we're instead like, oh, which of these, like, this guy's definitely going to turn out to be evil. Like, Galadriel's way too attracted to this man for him not to turn out to be an evil character.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the reveal has to be that he's a scumbag.
Has to, just like watching like the dude bro backwards cap suddenly reveal as like the refined IPA turns into a natty light before his image, and he puts on like his evil hoodie,
Right. But that's the thing, is that like instead of actually like caring about the character, like any choices the character makes, we are instead left solely to be like, which evil character is this guy secretly?
Yes, and that's again a show that revolves around big reveals being treated as twists instead of actual character development and progression is not a show that is built to last, nor will it be engaging, because like you said, we're just then crossing off possibilities. We're going, well, no, it can't be that guy. Well, no, it can't be that guy. You know who I think it would have been absolutely fucked if Sauron was was one of the characters? One of the older Hobbit dude. That was running around looking at star charts. Wouldn't that have been wild if he was like an evil fuck all of the sudden? You're like, what? Why would this happen? I don't know, but it would be something you could lay out with like the idea of something. You could tie it in or have something occur like that. But no, instead it's the idea of, can you believe that Halbrand was evil? Yes.
Very, very easily from day one. Clearly being set up to be evil.
Yeah, and then like when he's saying lines like in the prison, like the best way to actually defeat your enemies is to give them a way to defeat their enemies that will also benefit you. I'm like, evil guy like 101, absolutely. And then later when he's saying like, I'm not trying to ruin the world. I believe that the only way to heal the world is by ruling it. I'm like, yeah. Again, like evil guy 101. I don't see myself as the bad guy, blah blah blah. It's like right up there with the MCU when they have Loki talking about like, well, how much good do I actually have to do to balance the scales? Because like he's about to ask that of Galadriel.
Well, and so like actually I think that comparison's really good, because I think what frustrates me about the Rings of Power season 1 is that it reminds me so much of the MCU. We are not allowed to enjoy this show just for this being the show. We are not allowed to enjoy a single moment of this season for just being the season. Instead, it has to be part of this larger unraveling plot. That this whole season ends up feeling like if this whole show is a prequel, then this season feels like the prequel to the prequel.
Yeah, and wouldn't you know it, when they were talking about what they had in store for season 2, the showrunners actually were giving a little bit of a preview about what we can expect. Do you want to know the comparison that they made of what Sauron is going to be in season 2, Dredd?
I'm going to be so mad, aren't I?
Oh yeah, they said Sauron will be like Walter White in season 2.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Would you be mad if they also made a Darth Vader comparison later on in the article?
All right, I am, and I cannot believe I'm about to do this.
Don't you dare. No, this is not, unless Sauron has a son that goes good, this is not a Darth Vader type of character.
I'm about to defend George Lucas is what what I am, like, literally angry at myself about, but I am about to defend George Lucas.
Christ.
And specifically, I am going to talk about how George Lucas has restraint, which is something George Lucas does not actually have, and yet, comparatively to the Rings of Power, he does. So, George Lucas, when George Lucas did his prequel, we know already that, like, Anakin is Darth Vader. We know that Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan. We are not, like, at the end of episode 1, this character named Glup Shido doesn't turn around and be like, yeah, Glup Shido is just my family name. I go by Obi-Wan. at the end of episode 1. He doesn't like we're not left as a reveal.
Uh-huh.
Like it's just treated as part of the like the George Lucas does not pretend that we know less than we do as the audience. He does not pretend that we don't know who the fuck Obi-Wan Kenobi is. He doesn't pretend that we don't know who any characters. We are treated as adults by George Lucas, who once again I cannot believe I am praising George Lucas for his
George.
restraint.
Now this is pod racing Lucas. Would never.
George, now this is pod racing Lucas has a higher degree of restraint than the writers of the Rings of Power.
Would it be helpful, Dredd? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. They also drew comparison from Satan in John Milton's Paradise Lost, because again, these are like 18-year-old freshmen who are somehow writing this whole thing. Like, actually, Sauron's going to be an anti-hero, like Walter White, but maybe also like be a good guy, like Darth Vader. But he's like really, really compelling, like Satan in Paradise Lost, and that's like what we're wanting to do. Like, there's a reason people love Romeo and Juliet hundreds of years later. That's what they say.
Literally,
because tragedy is one of the highest art forms.
Shoot me. That is, I am stupider for having heard those words in that order.
Oh shit, are you ready? So the first season is like Batman Begins, and The Dark Knight is the next movie with Sauron maneuvering out in the open. They know that Sauron is like the least interesting character of all of them that they've built, right? I hope that they know that. Enjoy this. This is going to become Westworld season 2. Like, I'm excited that the whole different genre of fan base is going to get a chance to see this absolute shittiness.
Yeah, it does kind of feel that way. Again, like, even in the original Lord of the Rings movies, we as an audience are allowed to know things that the protagonist does not. As Smeagol loses the battle for his soul with Gollum, we are allowed to see its slow progress, and we are allowed to feel worry for Sam and Frodo. The writers of Rings of Power don't seem to think that we as an audience are smart enough to handle that, and I think that's the big thing that pisses me off.
I don't think they're smart enough to handle it.
Okay, but that's a different issue. I'm giving them the credit to assume that they are not slathering morons, and just that they assume that we are. And fair or not, it is irritating, I will say, to have a show that directorially, the issue is not the directorial choices, which, like, there are so many times where that could be the issue. And yet it's not, and yet it still feels hollow and disappointing.
Because it ultimately is, because they have people that make these kinds of comparisons going for it. Like, they're stating what they want the show to be. They want it to be this buzz thing.
I am the one who puts on the ring. I am the one who knocks on the door.
I just, like, when you're drawing these comparisons, it sounds like word vomit, because it doesn't actually seem like any of them actually have anything to do with each other. Like, the pacing of Breaking Bad and watching Walter White versus how Batman Begins goes into Dark Knight, which is like, and again, you know, you were talking about a spicy take earlier. I'm going to give one now. The Dark Knight trilogy has not aged well because of Batman. No one is like, man, that Christian Bale Batman performance is the thing that ties these movies together. Like, it's not. It's Liam Neeson being Ra's al Ghul. It's Heath Ledger as the Joker. It's Tom Hardy as Bane. It's being able to play off of Batman. And so if they're saying, like, well, this is going to be now where Sauron's out and about and being evil, and doing what exactly? Like, what? He's now trying to rule the Southlands? He's fighting a war against Adar, I guess. but then like, how is that going to tie in? Is Adar going to try and make alliances with the men and with the elves? No, that's not going to happen. So who knows?
Yeah, I think again, like ultimately, it could be worse. It could be a lot worse.
Could it?
Yes, it could have been a lot worse.
I think it could have been if they were taking big swings, but like I said, this is the worst possible outcome in my head because this is a mediocre product. It's just safe enough to make people feel like season 2 they'll improve, but they're not going to learn anything from it. So then it'll be at the end of season 2 people being like, is this bad? Hold on, this can't be bad. I've invested 16 episodes in this thing, surely it can't be bad. And then when season 3 comes out, people will be like, I mean, I'll get to it, I guess, at some point.
I think there's a dark horse chance of it actually being good next season and then being really bad season 3. And we can kind of talk about why that is the case when we talk about what's going to happen next season, probably.
Okay, well, let's talk about it a little bit. With Darth Batman Satan himself, Darth Batman Satan and Juliet. There we go. John Middleton's Darth Batman Satan and Juliet.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. So at the end of the season, they forge the 3 Elven Rings of Power, which are mainstays throughout the rest of the series. Like, Gandalf gets one eventually. Celebrimor gets one, and Galadriel gets one. So Galadriel, her husband, and one of her boyfriends each get one.
Nice. You know, hot. The polycule that rules all.
Yeah, I will say that Celebrimor is historically not thrilled probably about Galadriel's polycule, but, you know, Galadriel's thrilled about her polycule.
Gandalf doesn't mind because he's like, at least she's like my height and not, 4 foot tall. I mean, I've been stuck in the woods too long with these fuckers. I'm like 1,000 years older than you, and also like our height difference means you're like a child. Like it doesn't work on any level. I'm sorry, Nori.
I'm going to get canceled if I stay in this Hobbit area. Like
it's only a matter of time. I can only make peaches and apples for nefarious purposes for so long.
Right. Eventually, they're going to meet too for both a problematic age difference and a problematic height difference.
Yeah. So, what do you think is going to happen in season 2? What are they going to push for?
So, to your earlier point, I think that like Numenor Game of Thrones or Numenor, like Cloak and Dagger stuff is very likely. Ultimately, very similarly to, ironically, Game of Thrones, where like one group of like kind of not the main noble family, but a noble family moves to Middle Earth and they become the survivors of some disaster. There's going to be that happens. So like Isildur's dad is the one guy who's like, oh yeah, we got to get the fuck out of here, and like so they survive the fall of Numenor.
Again, like a royal family from a civilization arguably at its peak deciding to leave to the BFE area that's across a sea of some kind, where then they're able to use that as advantages. Where are the goddamn dragons, Dread?
Wow.
Where are they?
On the other side, unfortunately.
Fucking hell. God damn it. At least they're wizards. I'll take it.
Yeah, we get wizards instead. And they're like much better than the Game of Thrones wizards.
Game of Thrones wizards are just like old guys who try and poison you,
right?
Just accidentally, hypothetically, at least.
So, yeah. So we'll probably get some of that. We'll probably get but that does mean that we are like the series of what the A, B, and C and D plots for next season are going to be even more like convoluted and stressed, because presumably we're not giving up Galadriel as a focus character.
No, we can't. I mean, even though her arc is effectively done, congratulations, TV show, you did it. Like, she's now ruling and she's sticking where she is. So she is going to remain static. Congrats.
Right, and yet, because we've spent so much of this season with her, she has to be a main character.
She's going to go on a misadventure. It's going to happen. Her and Elrond, maybe.
Probably. Additionally, we then have like probably Durin is still going to be some sort of focal character at some level.
Like the most compelling part of the show is going to be watching Doran trying to work his way back into his father's good graces, and then also assembling power and allies should he not get his father's approval to become heir. Like that is legitimately the most compelling part to me of what could be a next show, because it's a culture that like the modern art deco vibe that they give for the dwarven culture is so cool to me. And so if they're just doing that, and then it's a I mean, for lack of a better word, it's basically like a mineral rights dispute within a family. Like, yeah, fuck, I would love that so much, but I know it can't be like the A plot by any means. So I'm guessing
that's probably a D plot.
Yeah. Yeah, goddamn bastards.
Which unfortunately leaves us as like Numenor is the most, what I would say, the most likely good A plot, and I'm very worried that we're just going to actually keep doing Galadriel. And I actually think Galadriel was well acted and like set up this season. Don't get me wrong. I have
nothing against the performance. I have everything against the writing and the pacing.
And I do think that we're probably still going to get Galadriel as A plot, and then I guess probably Sauron is B plot.
Let's not forget Rune, the wizard going off to Rune. That's gonna probably be the new D plot, because
too many plots already. Too many plots.
Yeah. So Sauron is probably the B plot. That's gonna be him and Adar, I swear, going head to head with each other. Yeah. A plot would be Numenor and Galadriel.
We're gonna be doing just a more boring version of the what was the Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor game.
We are. That's exactly what's happening, isn't it? Fuck.
It's like, what if Shadow of Mordor was profoundly not as cool as Shadow of Mordor is?
What about Shadow of Mordor? Only you make all of the worst decisions and you can't get out of it. It's a cutscene that's inescapable that gets split up among 8 hours of television, and it doesn't come out for another 2 years. Huh? Are you excited for that?
That's my hell.
And we're gonna watch it, huh?
Yeah, I guess I am gonna watch it, because like, this wasn't terrible enough for me to pull the cord on. Yeah. That's the ultimate cruelty. It just wasn't bad enough for me to want to like completely give up.
I mean, my partner has pointed out this contradiction in my own brain, and so her stance is that if I'm going to be watching fucking Wheel of Time season 2 to talk about it with you, I cannot pull the plug on this show as bad as I want to, because I know season 2 is going to be disappointing again. They're just going to do the same trick reveal of like, who is this character? It's actually Bimbrog, the blah 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 or whatever, and it's gonna be like, cool, wow, oh, this changes everything, does it? Well, we'll see in season 3. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
This is how you win me over. Give me fucking Tom Bombadil and Durin just like balling out hardcore, like again, Night on the Town with those two guys.
100%. Like, I think that leaning into the comedy would actually not be the worst thing in the world for them, because the light comedy has actually really been working.
Yeah, because it rounds out characters and like makes them feel 3-dimensional by showing them have like other levels beyond pontificating and things. It's kind of like how they introduced Elrond as being like a conniving, skeeving politician of some kind. It's like, he's a half-breed and we can't really trust him, and he's always willing to say whatever people want to just get their approval. And then like we don't see that for the rest of the season. He's just like being a genuine guy with Doran instead.
Yeah, he's just like a dude.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't think he needs to be introduced that way at all. I think like instead maybe you have him be like, I've got a penny in my pocket and a heart and a song in my heart kind of guy, and then like having to betray his friend and do this thing is the thing that makes him like get twisted and realize that maybe some mild white lies are better than anything else. Like growth as a character would be, I think, a good thing. Because then they would explain like how he became like this absolute real politique reputation that he gets a little bit later on. Just as an idea.
No, I think it's a good idea.
It just felt like they were introducing Elrond as an already formed character that we already know him as, when he wasn't that in the entire show. And so, like, there's no reason to do it. Just introduce him as he actually is. Or, and this might be even too big of an ask, so I wouldn't ask for it. But what I would love is if they didn't lampshade everything. Like, just let the characters exist and don't have anyone offer commentary and be like, man, this person is a real stick in the mud, aren't they? And it's like, yeah, I guess they are. I wouldn't have guessed it before otherwise.
But you've told me now, so it must be true.
Yeah, this is a show that is written in a way for someone that they could cook dinner while watching. Meaning you could only half pay attention to it because people are going to speak out their emotions. So even the person in another room will be able to tell what the impression is. Which
I think that's pretty accurate.
Again, it's not a sign of great storytelling, at least in my opinion. I'm sure there are other people who are like, well, I can't properly register human emotions and dwarf emotions, and I don't like the complexities that exist within this, so I enjoy it, and I am super excited for a second season. And to those people, I really, really wish them well, and I hope that season 2 is not what I expect it to be. But when it is a disappointment and it is a mystery box having to answer some of its own questions because it can't keep stringing people along and those answers are not good, just know. Like, this is what happens. Like, it's what happened with Westworld a few years ago. It's what happened with Lost, before that. Like, I kind of grew up in the time that was, at least with my media diet, like Lost was just before me. Like I was kind of in the tail end of Lost. So there's a little of nostalgia, I think, for those earlier seasons and things. But like anytime a mystery box show gets dressed up in a certain way, but it's still fundamentally a mystery box, aka big reveals are treated like twists, even though the reveals aren't actually a twist and don't really further the plot, it falls apart after about a season and a half. And we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, I ultimately think that's a really fair, probability. Like, I would say that it is more likely than not that's how it goes down.
I know we'll touch on this when we cover House of the Dragon, but it's my exact same fear for what season 3 of House of the Dragon would be like, because I think there's enough material for a season 2, but for a season 3, I think they're going to have to turn into a mystery box show. And a show going from a hardline plot into trying to figure out what the big reveal is going to be each week is more forgivable a sin, in my opinion, than a show that doesn't believe in its characters enough, that then is trying to string you along with who are they? What are their motivations? What is happening? Instead of letting the characters grow and develop and tell a narrative story.
I don't think that it is impossible that this show pulls it out. It's just that I think the odds are stacked against it based on how it's been set up.
Mm-hmm.
It is given itself a real hole to dig itself out of by trying to be clever, by trying to be pithy, by trying to make it, to realistically to drive engagement solely through, the twists and the whodunit aspect of it all.
I will never forget the clip of Al Michaels trying to pitch episode 4 of Rings of Power. Be like, and who's Durin gonna have to align himself with? Is it Elrond or Galadriel? Instead, find out next week
on the Rings of Power.
Okay, guy, just I don't know. Again, they're locked in. They did just good enough for sure to get a second season. I mean, they were already guaranteed 4 seasons. So no matter how bad they are, 4 seasons is for sure going to happen. I think season 3 is when people are going to turn on them. And so my question is, in season 4, what happens? Like, what would you want to see? And this is kind of the last segment here. We're going to like call our absolute shots here for season 4. Like, what is going to be like the thing that they try and do in that final season?
My guess is that they are going to try to go full in on the it's a spectacle battle every week thing.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's accurate. I think I could see that happening with them just being like, well, it'll generate buzz,
Right.
and we'll do it. My prediction is going to be that the show will have shifted so much by season 4, a la like a Westworld. I'm sorry for that comparison, but like we'll keep on doing it. That they will give up on its inherent premise and it will focus entirely on the idea of what's happening in the Southlands and in Mordor and in the Far East. And it will just be all about that.
It'll be a Mordor TV show at that point.
Yes, that's what I think will happen. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right move, but I feel like that will be their course correction as people are not really liking certain elements of season 3. So they wrap up some storylines that later on in that season, based on the feedback from season 2. And then in season 4, that's when they're pushing forward, trying with these other aspects. Same thing to try and build up some hype. Have people do the soy jack pointing back face, being like, look, they're doing this storyline too now. Wow, isn't this cool? So,
I actually don't hate that, is the thing. Like, ultimately, I don't think that would be terrible.
And it's a wheel of time, Dread, because then they get you for season 4 and you go, that was mediocre, but it's something to build on again. And then season 5 happens. You're like, oh, this is underwhelming to say the least. And then season 6 happens and you're going, this should have died a long time ago. Why is this unholy abomination still on? So
I hate that you're almost probably exactly right.
It's a sickness. It's so bad. I'm going to take my decorative gun and my GPS map and my ability to say please and thank you to orcs and take this shit over before evil white guy with a hoodie number 4 decides to roll through and lay claim.
Yeah, it's really funny. You really could just be kind of a nice person. And
literally helping people get their goal, even if it is ultimately serving you, and you can rule.
Yeah, just like a basic social skills class, like a self-help manual, and like a couple of good contract lawyers, and you're good.
It really is a show built for people who lack the ability to empathize or recognize emotions in other people. They're like, hold on. By helping them get what they want, I can get something in return that might benefit me more than it benefits them. Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the whole thing, that like of society, the social contract to which we all exist under, just blowing their minds immediately.
Truly incredible.
Do you have any closing thoughts that you wanted to say about this thing, Dread?
No, I think, again, like, the only thing I would say is that I just wish that the writers thought more of their audience.
I wish that the writers thought would just be my line, because, again, I feel like they thought of a whole bunch of cool ideas, and then they thought, well, we want to show it, and so they based reveals around that instead of character arc points. And the way to fix it is not have 9 different subplots, have maybe 3, call me crazy, but 3 subplots, 3 plot lines that are interwoven and maybe interact more than once in just one episode. Maybe have them interact, and hear me out here, every other episode directly and thematically every episode. Wouldn't that be something? If half-hour sitcoms can do it, I would hope the billion-dollar fantasy franchise could as well.
You know what? I'm going to take back my earlier thing, and I think we should just do a half-hour sitcom with Elron and Durin.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that would be great. Galadriel coming in like the Kramer. Just like, whoa, you wouldn't believe it.
All right, so Durin is definitely the George Costanza character. Elron is definitely Jerry. And I guess that makes... So Galadriel is Kramer. Disa, the wife, is definitely Elaine, and that makes Halbrand Newman.
I can see it.
Halbrand.
I mean, again, I feel like we're in our desire to not MCUify something. The idea of a half-hour sitcom sounds like the most MCU thing in the world, but I truly think that it would be much more engaging television of what would take place.
Right.
I guess it would be like the Lower Decks version. You know, Lower Decks is the Star Trek, but then like this sitcom could be. But yeah, follow their lives. It's much more engaging to me. A Modern Family version, even, but of like the dwarven households that's taking place. It's like Durin being like, I'm nothing like my father, and then like immediately cuts to the father, same pose, same clothes, just gray beard instead, being like,
I'm nothing like my son.
Yeah, I can see it. The magical orbs that record all are following this dwarven family and seeing what life is like for Valinor Productions to show and highlight the cultural exchange. And
Galadriel, old Galadriel just got a new young hot husband. So she's the I don't know what the Modern Family character is, but the old guy.
Yeah, the Al Bundy person. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and be off making better TV. I think consuming better TV. We will be. Our next episode is going to be covering House of the Dragon. That thoroughly show that is a show indeed. Of all the shows out there, it's certainly one of them, but it is one that I will enjoy discussing with you, Dredd. In the meantime, where can people find you? What have you got going on?
Don't find me, but if you have to, I'm at Dredd_bot at twitter.com. That's where you can hear me or see me post my mental illness live to the world.
Basketball season is starting up, so it's going to be a whole bunch.
Will be especially mentally ill.
Yeah.
Also, I've been brainwashed and kidnapped by Philadelphia fans in the group chat, and now I'm rooting for Philadelphia teams unironically.
Oh, how's that? We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I mean...
once the East standings start to shake up a little bit.
I'm talking about the other sports.
Football
and more specifically, baseball. And the Phillies just won, baby.
Hell
all
yeah.
about the Phillies.
I again have not followed any baseball this year. I forget what I said in the group chat, but I was happy that the Astros beat the Marlins when it was in fact the Seattle Mariners. And so congrats.
Same basic premise.
I'm just hoping that the less I care, the better they do. Because then I can see actual baseball fans suffer and
if it makes you feel any better, the Dodgers are almost certainly pulling a Houston Rockets. We are actually the real MVP moment, and they're posting propaganda about how you should just declare the team with the most wins the winner.
I mean, if we're going to start talking about like who to crown maybe prematurely, we'll save it for the House of the Dragon episode. That's happening. In the meantime, everyone, you can go ahead and follow the show at Dolphin Garage, me on Twitter whenever I have a Twitter again. And also, let me see, anything else that's happening?
Donate to your local mutual aid funds. Donate to, survival funds for trans folks and people fighting on the front lines of this very strange time we're living in.
Yes, absolutely. Please do all of the actually important and good things that Dredd was mentioning, instead of my silly little ideas.
Just do both. Do both.
Oh well, no. Do Dreads first, please, and then we'll figure it out from there. In the meantime, bye.